Okay. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. I'm stalling. I'm having a stroke.
I was just gonna say,
Hold
are
on.
you having a stroke?
I am.
I hate that this microphone picks up my hiss. All right, we're just gonna get right into it. So, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Cool Friend Hour. I'm your host, Morgan Fezza.
And I'm Taylor.
Let's get weird.
Only took 10 tries. We had to switch.
It's all right. Like I said, buttery flaky crust.
But buttery flaky crispy crust. I need a nap.
Can you tell we're delusional today? It's just gonna be one of those podcasts. So I was like, you know what? Let's just roll with it. Let's just be who we are.
Dude, that made my pit sweat. I'm sweating. It's not even that deep.
And she's sweating all over her brand new
girlfriend hour shirt. If I can show it.
We got merch. We got merch.
I'd show the back, but
go ahead. Throw it back, Taylor. Throw it back.
I'm trying not to sell pics,
Your microphone keeps disappearing, so it just looks like a void in your butthole.
Yeah, pretty much.
You look like you have a galaxy in your ass.
I mean, they do say that.
I swear I'm delusional today. I'm starting to lose it.
Patrick has stank ass. I got galaxy ass. What can we do?
I feel like no matter what podcast we do, somehow we're gonna throw Patrick's ass in there.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which, by the way, I want everybody to know that he posted an Instagram post talking about how there's 5 tons of fecal matter in the ocean. And I was like, yeah, that's because you don't wipe your ass. It's because you don't wash your ass, Patrick. Yeah.
He thought it was so funny. He literally
I just thought it was so funny that after we literally did that podcast and he was getting roasted between the two of us, and then he posted that on Instagram. I never see him post on Instagram, and then that was when he posted.
I don't know if it was intentional or not, but whatever it was perfect timing.
It was absolute perfect timing. Okay, so let's get into it. Today we are going to talk about a super hot topic, one of I want to say the paranormal communities, one of their favorite hotspots, the Waverly Hills Sanitorium Hospital. Everybody knows this place mainly due to the body shoot. That seems to be one of the bigger topics, and it's where everybody loves to go. But what's funny is that a lot of people say that the body shoot isn't even the creepiest part. It's actually the nicer parts of the sanatorium, which is
which says a lot.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's spooky. But reading some experience stories, which we're gonna kind of dive into a little bit today, after we kind of talk about the history and whatnot, a lot of people are saying that the actual rooms were scarier than the shoot where all the bodies were just kind
of. Yeah, I will say when I was doing some of the research on it, especially when I was looking on Reddit, because I feel like Reddit is where you find all the great stuff. Some people were posting some creepy pictures. There were some creepy, even on the Facebook page of the Waverly Hills Sanatorium, they posted pictures of what their guests had seen. It's these creepy apparition photos. And I was
there's some good ones. What boggles my mind though is everyone that I've talked to about the Waverly Hills Sanatorium, they all say that pictures don't even do it justice, because when you roll up to this place, they're it is a looming massive building, and it's extra spooky. It's just it has an air to it. And I was reading this one person was yeah, back in the day they threw they had a concert and somebody thought it would be a good idea to have it at Waverly Hills, and she's I went to the concert not really knowing where it was going to be at, and then you showed up, and she's it was creepy as hell. She's why would you have a concert in an old sanatorium? And I'm I mean, yeah, good point. Who thought that was a good idea?
You know what? Honestly, maybe somebody had the best intentions in mind, and they were you know what? These ghosties need some light in their life, so they're let's get them fucked up.
They were let's put a new definition to rave in the grave.
Right?
We're gonna, or no, actually, I'm gonna keep that thought in my mouth.
We're gonna do like we did last week. We're gonna suck it back in.
Suck it back in. We're not even gonna say it. Okay, so Taylor, I'm kicking it over to you, girlfriend, because I have about 2 brain cells left. I know you have
I got
probably
1.5.
Together, we're gonna make 3.5 brain cells, and we're gonna make this podcast happen. So
I'm surprised you even did the math there. My brain couldn't even process what that was.
it took me a second.
Okay.
It did take me a second. I was like, wait, did I say I was 2 and she was 1.5? Or
it's close enough. It's okay.
It's 5. I'm like, I can't.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. It is what it is.
So yeah, let's dive into it. What's the history?
All right. So what I don't know what you gathered or what I gathered. I'm sure we probably have most of the same stuff. But
okay.
To start out, Waverly Hills Sanatorium was an early 20th century Tudor Gothic revival style architecture. And it was a significant, or it still is, but it was like a huge significant contributor to the Louisville, Kentucky community. So the sanatorium itself is located in Louisville, Kentucky. It's still there to this day. I think from what I read, it's closed now, but like they still, I think they do like tours and stuff. Like it was closed for a while, and then now they do like tours and all that, and you can kind of like go in and see the history of it. But otherwise, originally it was a 2-story frame building. It had been constructed in 1908. So 1908 was when it, or no, 1883 was when it was first around, I think, right? Was it 1883?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
And someone by the name of, I forgot what his importance was, because, you know, I did the research, but my brain didn't kind of like process everything. Someone by the name of Major Thomas H. Hayes, he had actually bought it. And at the time, it was only I think at the time it was only a 2-story type of like home. And he had turned it into a 1-room schoolhouse for his daughters. And then comes 1908, I guess he had sold it to, I think it was some of it I didn't pick up. So if you hear anything that I'm like, if you notice I'm missing anything, please step in and say something. I don't remember
one thing
who
I will
bought it.
say is, so the reason that Waverly Hills like came to be was because in 1910, and this was actually the case for like even Greystone in New Jersey, a lot of the psychiatric hospitals, some of the bigger ones, a lot of them came as a result of an original hospital that was built and then became overcrowded, because a lot at that time, things that we wouldn't typically like hospitalize people for, they were just getting institutionalized, which is so terrible. So in 1910, there was a hospital that was built on like an exposed hill to fight off White Death, also known as TB at the time. And the hospital became so overcrowded that they had been donated money and land in 1924. So they decided to construct a new hospital. And that's what we know today as Waverly Hills Sanatorium. And they opened their doors officially in 1926. Yeah. And they were considered the most advanced TB hospital in the entire country. Even though, which confused me about this, was the fact that they were considered the most advanced TB hospital, but there was no cure, and they killed virtually everyone that was in Waverly Hills.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure how that defines as the most advanced.
Maybe they had like the least amount of deaths. But like when I was reading,
but they killed everybody.
I mean, that is true. But I did read. I did read though, and I don't know where the official like truth lies, but some websites fabricated the number of how many people died. So in one article I had read that like 50,000 people had died there. But the most they had ever had, I think at one point, like at a time, like per year, was about over 400 patients. And when the building had first been designed, it was only designed to accompany 40 to 50 tuberculosis patients safely. But of course, as you know, with any sanatorium or sanctuary or asylum, that's never the case, especially
No.
in the 1900s. They always ended up becoming overcrowded. Um, but in another article that seemed a little bit more, I guess, realistic, they said that the most people that had passed away, I think in total, was a little over 6,000 people. So, but majority of the people that had got like tuberculosis patients that were there pretty much died from either tuberculosis or from complications of what they were doing to the patients.
Yeah.
There
Like, I
wasn't
feel
many
like their
survivors.
cures, it was a lot of, I think what makes Waverly Hills so terrible, and I mean, this is the same with like a lot of asylums and stuff, is the fact that, I mean, these people were technically just guinea pigs. Like,
Yeah.
they were taking in these patients with this reputation of being the most advanced TB hospital in the whole country, so people were probably flooding to them, and realistically they were just trying out new forms of treatments and kind of like what we would know as cancer trials today. Like,
Yeah.
but except for obviously, like, today they're trials, but they're not going to kill you, like,
Yeah,
whereas
like, they
like
try
this
to
was like,
reassure you that, like, things are
yeah,
gonna
it's
be
either it's
okay.
gonna work or it's just not gonna work, and then nothing's gonna happen. It's not gonna be like, hey, we might give you this medicine and you might,
Yeah. We
like,
don't know what's gonna happen, but you're gonna tell
you
us.
might bubble up. There might be some like spontaneous human combustion. We're not really sure.
That back then is like the today, "Well, what if I just" like, "What if I just"
Intrusive thoughts.
yeah. But back then they were like, "Well, what if we just give this person this?" "Ooh, I don't know." They're like, "What's gonna happen? I don't know. I guess we'll find out." I'm feeling a little quirky today,
Come on, we're feeling a little froggy. Let's
right?
leap. Let's leap.
Right?
I can't. It's terrible. But it was said that there were some people actually ended up surviving tuberculosis. I hate saying it. I
Tuberculosis.
just like saying TB.
Honestly, I do too.
TB.
From here on out, we'll just call it TB.
TB phone home. Uh oh my gosh.
That was your
Delusion is setting
ADHD
in. I
kicking in,
feel like I need a lobotomy. I need somebody to open up my brain and just be
right?
like,
Sometimes I just want to be a veggie.
all they're gonna find is like a little man just sitting on a record player, just spinning in circles and listening to like, what's that
Stevie Nicks.
song? I wish it would be Stevie Nicks, but my brain is just at such a dysfunctional point. It'd probably be like dun 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 dun, like just spinning in a circle, and that's just how it exists in there.
Honestly, if I got a lobotomy, I think I would just still be the same.
Probably, me too. I feel that.
They'd be like, it didn't work. We'll try again. She's still the same. That's
Be like, oh, we think that she's gonna have like permanent damage from the lobotomy, and it's like, nah, I'm still here. This is
maybe
me.
it'll correct things. You know how they always like
Oh my,
did lobotomies to people and it like turned them into vegetables? Like, what
yeah,
if it's because they were doing it on healthy people? Like,
true.
maybe they really got to do it because you know how it was back then. Like, they would send anybody, like, but especially in like the 50s. You know how they would like have, in like some cases, and I don't know if this is probably like the thing, but back then, like, if the housewife, if she was acting out and being crazy, what would the husband do? Send her to the loony bin,
Institutionalizer.
right? And she was like fine. Or even if they were like slightly like mental, like, I don't know what mental health was back then. Like, I don't know what their
Yeah, because this kind
idea
of
of mental
reminds me of
health
like back in
was.
the day, like if you could read, you were a witch. And it's like, what?
Yeah, right.
Like,
Which is still so funny because especially when you like research about witchcraft and like just witches in general and paganism and all that, like you see how every single person uses paganism and like witchcraft in their daily life. Like even religions use it.
Pretty much.
Like,
Pretty
you
much.
you literally put, I mean, maybe not the intention part, but, like, people put spices and seasonings into their food. That's the same stuff that, like, you can use in spells and stuff if you just put an intention towards it.
True.
Or when you're, like, manifesting something, or, like, hoping that, like, you'll get something or do something, like, that's all not exactly the same, but, like, you get what I mean, in
No,
a
but I
way.
understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But everything was like witchcraft back then. They were like, oh, if you're acting up, you're a witch. To the
Right?
sanatorium.
Like, if you give a kid medicine, you're automatically a witch. They're like, "Oh, she knows witchcraft."
But it was like they used to institutionalize people for
To be
just
quirky.
really stupid things.
Was.
Like people like, and I mean this could not be right. This is just me being like dramatic, but like it's like your kid wouldn't behave and they're like automatically like, oh, I'm sorry,
But
you're
they
gonna have to
really did
go.
do that. Like, your wife or your husband, well, it was more so I noticed, like, from what I've like, learned over the years about the past, is that, like, a lot of more, like, women tended to get sent there for the reasoning that, like, maybe their husband didn't want to be with them anymore, and so rather than, like, divorcing, because divorce wasn't a thing back then, they didn't, it was shunned upon, kind of, like, they'd be like, oh, let me find an excuse to send my wife to the loony bin. Or if she wasn't being the perfect housewife, or if you even showed slight signs of, like, something that wasn't normal, you immediately got
Like
sent.
depression, like postpartum depression was another big one.
Yeah.
Like women didn't know how to, like, that wasn't really like identified. Like, you know, the women back then with their mammy grannies, the little, I don't even know what to call them, the little gowns that they wear, the moo they were popping out like 9 to 10 kids. I
That's true.
mean, like, and it's like, listen, I love my one child, 10 kids.
Mm-mm.
No wonder I would be going nuts.
It's
There's
too
some
much.
people that I think are just like built for that life. I'm definitely not that person, but like,
I'm okay.
I'm like 10 kids, that's a lot. That's a lot.
We'll have to, in the near future, touch base on a story. We'll have to talk about a story. I have to look it back up. I read it a long time ago, and I watched a YouTuber talk about it, but I don't know if you ever heard about, it was a hospital that was like a secret private hospital for women and children, and the women would come, say, like, divorced or were raped, or had a situation where, like, maybe they needed to get away from an abuser or something, and so this hospital was meant to house pregnant women, and then their kids, obviously, when they were born, like, the kids would, live there with the mothers, and then at some point they would kind of help them out and then release them back out into the world. But these women would sign up and think that they were getting this amazing treatment, but turns out the whole hospital, the woman that was in charge was actually selling the babies.
What
So,
the
like,
heck?
the babies would come out, like, the mother wouldn't know where the baby is because they wouldn't get to see the baby at first. So the woman would, like, have the nurses take the babies and literally sell them to these rich families. And they'd be like, "Where's my baby?" And they're like, "Oh, your baby didn't make it." Or your baby got sick, or your baby had something wrong with them. Like, it was crazy.
What?
I have to find it. We got to talk about it because it's such a
We definitely
crazy
have to talk
story.
about that because that sounds absolutely terrible. And like, that's the first time I've ever heard of that.
It was intense.
Um, yeah. So back to Waverly Hill Sanatorium. We
Sidetrack.
digress. You, like we two of us. Wait, do you have like diagnosed ADD?
No, like, I don't know how
I
to
do.
go. I like, how do you go about, and we're gonna talk about this for a second because I want to know how you go about getting diagnosed. Because I feel like I I've noticed, like, especially, I do a lot of research. I'm like a research person rather than, like, going and asking, like, a professional or something. But I've read that, like, it's a lot harder for women to get diagnosed for ADHD,
Yeah.
because back then when they came up with the, like, the term of ADHD and ADD and all that, they said that the reason why males were always the ones to get diagnosed more was because they only tested on males. So, like, women are a lot harder, and, like, if you go to somebody, they'll kind of be like, "No, you're fine. Like, you just probably have, issues, or you're being too hyper, or you're talking too much, or."
No, I would talk to a therapist or like a psychiatrist because I just recently
I
got
gotta talk to my
diagnosed.
therapist.
Yeah, I just recently got diagnosed as like neurodivergent, so ADD, ADHD. And it kind of for us was like trial and error. It was just one of those things where it was like, all right, like I mean, I've been with my therapist for a little while now, and a lot of things were just kind of adding up,
Mhm.
and they tried to treat me for other things and like wasn't really doing much. But
Yeah.
then the one thing that treats like depression and ADD, ADHD, it's like a streamline med. They gave that to me and I noticed improvements, and there was like, okay, like I think we know what the issue is here. And so they started treating me for that, and I feel like a much like more normal person.
Yeah.
But
I
what
just
towards the end
wanna
of the day, when it starts to like wear off,
Mhm.
my train of thought is all over the place. But I was literally the reason I was asking is I was like, wait, do we both have ADD, ADHD? I'm like, because that is a mix for a podcast because we're
Yeah.
going to be taking like 20 different paths
Well,
on
I
one
mean,
conversation.
I mean, I know I have to get like an official diagnosis, but I've kind of already like said, and like my family has already said that like I'm pretty much like ADD, ADHD. I don't know what the term is because I heard that they don't use one of the terms now anymore. I think it's ADHD. I think now it's just ADD. I don't know.
I think
Or it's the
mine was
opposite. I don't know.
ADHD.
Maybe it's that. Maybe they don't use ADD anymore.
Yeah, because
I
they're pretty
don't
much the same thing. It's just it's basically like
know.
just neurodivergency.
Yeah.
Um, which like could mean a lot of things, but like to officially like get diagnosed with like ADD, ADHD, and a lot of the times people who have ADD, ADHD can also have like a smidgen of autism.
Hmm.
Like I've heard that a lot of that goes hand in hand. And just to our listeners, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist. If you think that you have these things, you need to talk to a healthcare professional.
Hmm.
But yeah, so um yeah, I was just gonna like laugh at that because I'm like, both of us are gonna be like zoop,
No, I
like
definitely, without a doubt. Like,
I'm
I
like,
feel
because
like I
at the
don't
end of the
even
day,
I really don't even I mean, eventually get it, but, like, I really don't need a professional to tell me that, like, I sidetrack all of my conversations. I there's, like, so I can make a whole list of things that I can go off on. And, like, even
yeah,
when, like, random times where we're having podcasts and I'll be like, "You know what I just thought of?" Or, "This just made me think of this." Like, "This particular thing just made me think of this." Like how we were saying before, for anybody that, didn't if they didn't notice earlier on when we first did the beginning of the podcast, we spent like 10 minutes trying to get me to practice my lines to open it. I was gonna open it and I was
blooper reels.
struggling. Yeah, I was struggling so bad. And for some reason, because Morgan said, "Hey everybody," the first thing my brain thought of was, "Hey everybody, it's Bunny." Don't even know where that came out from. Like, I haven't watched Graveyard Girl on YouTube, for those of you if you don't know what that is. I haven't watched her since I was, like, a teenager, so, like, I don't even know where that came from. It
It
just
just
popped out of
clicks.
nowhere. It comes out of nowhere, and I just get these random things. Like, somebody could be talking to me about something, and it'll immediately be, like, a random word, and I'll be like, "You know what? This made me think of something." Or sometimes when I'm sitting with myself and I'm talking in my head, because I have a lot of, internal conversations, I'll randomly tell, like, Patrick something, and he'll kinda look at me sometimes and be like, why did you bring that up?" And I'm like, "Well, it started out because I was thinking about this, and then a part of that made me think of this, and then I got into this, and I was kinda, like, questioning it, and so it's like a whole thing."
It's a big old, I always say it's like the tree of life. It just branches
Yeah,
out,
right?
and
I
the
don't know how
more
to
it
stop
branches
it.
out, the bigger it gets.
Alright, totally sidetracked.
Okay, so Waverly Hills Sanatorium. So you're talking about the height of TB. So in the 1900s, Louisville, Kentucky had the highest death rates in America by TB. So Waverly Hills was trying to solve this problem. However, the disease's treatment was probably even more brutal and just as dangerous as the actual disease itself.
Yeah, but
So,
before you get into that, I did wanna mention, um, besides, like, the treatment that we wanna talk about, with the sanatorium, it was like an enclosed space. So because they got so overwhelmed with patients, and they had such a like scared, it became an epidemic is what I'm trying to say. It became an epidemic to the point where they were so scared because they figured it was an airborne disease. So they decided to enclose the entire sanatorium. So if you were a nurse, a doctor, an employee, a patient, anything that you can think of, you basically were not allowed to leave grounds. So once you were admitted or once you started working there, you were to say goodbye to all your loved ones, and you were basically there for the rest of your life, living until hopefully something changes in the future. And it was to the point where they even had their own zip code. They had their own zip code, they had their own post office, they had a water treatment facility, they even grew their own fruits and vegetables. They even went as far as raising their own meat for slaughtering and like consuming, and pretty much any everyday things that you can think of, they had it covered. So I just wanted to put that out there because it wasn't like a normal asylum or sanatorium. Like any other place, I can't speak for all places, but like most other sanatoriums or asylums that you have heard of or gone to, like they would, at some point let patients go if they were ready, or doctors and nurses would get to go home. But like this was like a completely self-contained community.
Yeah.
Which is what made it even crazier.
Yeah. And it's just like sad. It honestly is really sad. Because kind of like segueing into the treatment, the doctors back in those days thought that the best treatment for the disease was fresh air, lots of rest, and like tons of nutritious foods. So like they took this approach, but then this approach, I feel like, very quickly changed, and then things kind of turned into like a guinea pig-esque trial and error,
as it always does.
Yeah. So some of the treatments that went on was they would insert balloons surgically into patients' lungs, and they would fill them with air to expand them, which, like, number one, anything in your lungs, like, that just sounds painful.
I just feel like you shouldn't even be touching like
the
the lungs
inside,
like
like,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that right there, because I mean, truthfully, we don't really like today, we don't really do well, as far as I know. Like I said, I'm not like a clinician or anything, but as far as I know, like typically we really don't touch the lungs unless like
It's
everything
puncture.
that we do is like antibiotics, or
Yeah.
like unless there's like a surgical need or like a transplant. Like, I don't know, it's just like you don't really hear about that. So for them back in those days to be surgically opening up the lungs and inserting balloons and filling them.
But like what kind of balloons? Like was it latex balloons? Party
No.
City latex balloons? Like were they colorful or were they like plain colored? That's what I
Sort
want
of.
to know.
I would like blue balloons in my lungs.
Like now that I think about it, this is probably why today so many people are allergic to latex. They probably like, let's take some latex balloons, shove them in their lungs. There you go.
Can you imagine? I would, if I knew, honestly, at that point, I would be like, I know that I'm going to be a goner. Just give me the balloons with the confetti in it. Like,
Because
just
at
fill
least if
me up.
it's exploding, then you get a cool, like, explosion
Yeah,
in your lungs. You go out with a bang and style.
exactly. And so when they cremate me and they wonder where all these sparkles are coming from.
Right.
Well, no, I guess the sparkles would probably burn up too. It would just be like a melted mess,
That's
but
true. That's okay.
the thought was nice.
I just thought it's the worst thing ever, and I don't know why. My brain just took me there. If they had it back then, I would play a prank on the morticians, and I'd have them like they'd get the balloons ready, like say the balloons are on the table, right? And they're getting ready to do it. Before I would get, knocked out to get the balloons put in, I'd spray fart spray into it so that when I die, right? I die, okay. Whatever, I go, I'm dead. The morticians open me up and they smell farts.
Oh, that just sounds terrible.
Right? But at least
That
I'm going
sounds
out
awful.
like I'm going out with
Like a
style.
final prank.
Yeah, right?
Like your final joke.
I just come up with my chest wide open and be like, and then I just go back to sleep. Be like, see ya.
Taylor, that is not how anatomy works.
That's how it's gonna work for me.
I could see you like haunting like the hospital and like I don't know. I could just picture you as like a ghost just hanging around like Waverly Hills and like pranking people and then like floating away and being like, hee hee hee.
Right?
Like,
Except I would be walking around. You know how usually the ghosts are like, ooh, I'd be like, ooh, I'm mentally ill.
you
And they'd be like, what was that? And I'd be like, it's me, mentally ill.
Mentally ill ghost. I cannot with you.
That would be my nickname. The mentally ill. Like, you know how they always give the ghost nicknames? Mine would be
we just call you
ill.
Meg, mentally ill ghost.
Oh, you're right.
Be like, sup, Meg? I feel like, I don't know. Kind of sounds like, what's that? I'm thinking of Top Gun.
I'm not gonna lie, I never watched those
He
movies.
called it like isn't like I thought it was like an airplane or something that was a MiG, an MiG.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think no, not my mom. I think my dad would know more about that than I would.
That's all right. All right. So we digress. We move forward now. We're redirecting on the path.
Okay. As always.
So the doctors, this is another really disturbing part. We were actually talking about this before we hopped on the podcast, but the doctors used to remove the patient's muscles and ribs from the chest, like so that the lungs could like get bigger and consume more oxygen. And it did not work.
What made you say that?
It was it turned out to be very, very bad because
flabbergasting.
I mean, think about that though. Like you have those muscles in your chest, first off. They're like
you need them.
Yeah. And they're
ribs
heavy
are one
duty.
thing.
Like I mean, but your ribs and your muscles are put there to protect like your chest. Like
I feel like it depends which ribs they move. Like if it's like particularly like right where the lungs are, then that'd be like stupid. But you know how like you hear those and then my brain's gonna do that thing again. Where those people like say that they remove the bottom parts of their ribs so that they can like
oh gosh, you're gonna go the Marilyn Manson route.
Yeah. So like or some people do it to cinch their waists. We'll be a little more
bottom,
PG.
but I feel like in order
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it probably would be the top, wouldn't it? Because if you're trying to make rooms for the lungs to expand more,
probably
I would think that they would take like a decent, probably from the bottom up.
That would make sense.
But that's like so bad. Like, and I wonder what they looked like. Because I feel like your
probably
ribs,
had like they probably had like concave spots in their chest. No,
like you could take somebody out with one punch.
I'd be
if somebody made me mad and I was like just chilling in my wheelchair in like the sanatorium, I would roll over and I would just like one little pound of pressure, just pop them right in the like.
No, because if I got mad at someone, like if they like piss me off, the first thing I would do is poke the spot where they don't have any bones. So it just like I feel like it would just be squishy. Yeah. I'd be like, you poked me. Be like,
you'd pop their balloon.
I'd be like, get some bones. You're missing them.
Get a backbone.
Right?
Get some rib bones.
Get some ribs.
Dude, I feel like it's so bad because like I want to be serious, but at the same time, I can't help but crack a little jokey joke. And like I'm like scared that like I'm like, am I being disrespectful? Like, am I gonna get
I mean, I feel like to certain people 100%, but to like 3/4 of the world now, I feel like dark humor is just how we cope. Yeah, like it's just how we cope with uncomfortableness.
True. So don't take this as a sign of disrespect, guys. This is just how we cope with like the dark, macabre things that we talk about on the podcast, like Waverly Hills Sanatorium,
which we're terribly trying to describe.
Yeah, we're. Normally, I mean, hopefully, it's painting like an entertaining picture.
Yeah, right.
Taylor would be like a mentally ill ghost. Yeah. I would be a vengeful wheelchair patient. It would just that just sounds really dysfunctional.
We're just adding a little sparkle, a little pizzazz to the story.
Spice. A little sugar and spice.
What? Well,
okay.
yeah,
So
no, wait, okay, real quick. No, because I gotta tell you, I'm only gonna say one thing. You just made me think of I'm a snack.
I knew you were gonna
I'm
say
a
that.
sneaky little snack. All
I
right,
knew you were gonna say that.
I'm done.
So we're gonna get to like the most like famous part of like Waverly Hills, which is the body chute. So the body chute is a 500-foot long, like it's really steep. It's like it's cement, right?
Yeah.
Like there's stairs going down I believe it's like the left side of it. And then it's just a straight 500-foot drop like to the bottom. And that's where they disposed of all the dead bodies. And so now it's called the death tunnel. And a lot of people will like investigate and they love to go in the body chute because they think that's like where they're going to get the most activities. But as I said kind of at the beginning of the podcast, what was interesting was that ended up not being the case. And people were actually more scared of like the rooms because each room has a story, and there's also a story for each individual entity that apparently resides at Waverly Hills. So a lot of people that have visited say that the rooms are actually scarier. Like they much more enjoyed being in a body chute that is probably the most morbid thing ever, but that it had the most like light energy out of like some of the rooms in there. And one room in particular, and Taylor, did you read about room 502? Do you want to delve into that?
I don't have a whole lot, so if I miss anything, I only wrote a little bit about it, but
I got you, boo.
They said that according to the stories, a nurse was found dead in room 502 in 1928 because she had committed suicide by hanging herself from the light fixture. They said that she was 29 years old at the time. When she had passed, she was unmarried and she was pregnant. And the reason why it got to that point was because I believe it was her depression. I don't know if it was depression prior to working there or if it was depression to the fact that she had been there maybe too long. And I mean, the fact that she was, pregnant, she probably was dealing with hormonal like depression and she wasn't able to see her family. And now that I think of that, I'm curious to know, I wonder if her like baby daddy, like if she had maybe like a fiance or a boyfriend before she had gone in and like that's how she got pregnant, or if it's something where like she got knocked up somehow.
Well, that was one of the stories was that so the story, there's so many different stories about room 502. The only thing that like stays consistent is that she was a 29-year-old nurse and she hung herself in that room and she was pregnant. But a lot of people were saying that she had an affair with the hospital owner.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and she also contracted TB. And because of the whole scenario and then not being able to leave the hospital, and apparently the hospital owner like wanted nothing to do with the pregnancy or her. It was kind of just a wham bam, thank you, ma'am. And that's the supposed story. I mean, nobody's really gonna know what actually happened, or even if she like truly killed herself, because there was also things circulating saying that she was actually killed.
That's what I was reading too.
Yeah. And so did it say why they would have killed her? Because I didn't get that.
The only thing that I had read was that her depression over the situation of being like, I guess, pregnant was the reason why it happened. So they don't really touch a whole lot of base. But now that I'm hearing, because I didn't know that she had supposedly contracted TB, Does that mean that every nurse, patient, well, not patient, but every nurse, doctor, employee that worked there, they knew what they were getting themselves into? Like, did they know that they were going to get TB? And did they all have TB, or was it only certain people? Because aren't certain
I
people?
mean, TB is like highly contagious and it's
Yeah.
spread by like respiratory droplets. So like if somebody's singing, speaking, like you know how sometimes when you're talking and like a little piece of food or like a little spit like jumps out and hits the person you're talking to?
Gonna make me throw up, but yes.
It happens all the time. I'm like, I always catch myself in a little, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Nah, because a kid literally accidentally did that to me today, and I normally would just pretend like it didn't happen, but it happened right in front of his eyes, and I was already tired as it was, and I was like, Ugh. I was like, why would you do
Oh,
that?
it's so yeah, I'm not about the whole saliva thing, but yeah, I mean it was not hard to pass it. Like so I mean that's why like for if you have to work for a hospital or something nowadays, you always have to get like TB tested. If you're working in like schools or hospitals, any kind of like scenario like that, they'll TB test you with like the little bubble on your arm.
That thing was always a pain. You had to come back like within
Yeah, it was like
24
2
to
days.
48 hours. Yeah. I always had to
Yeah.
do that when I worked at the hospital for the photography job.
Yeah, it's it's just because it's like it's a bad thing and once that outbreaks, like that's pretty bad. Um but there also um there's also like another thing tied to room 502 because there also was a story of a little girl who people will say that they catch her running up and down the third floor. There's a little boy playing with a ball, a woman with a bleeding wrist who mourns for help, and there's all these different stories. And maybe I read that wrong. I don't know if it was tied to room 502 or if that wasn't the only like haunted case.
Some of them were from other, like I know I read about the little girl. They said that she would roam around the third floor.
Okay.
So some of them I think were in certain areas, but
Yeah.
not all of them were specific.
Okay. Yeah. Because did you read about the ghost of Timmy?
No.
So there's one of the little boys kind of mentioned before. So this is another legend folklore that Timmy was a 6 to 7 year old child. He died in the hospital from TB. And they were saying that he just hasn't moved on yet because he died at such a young age, so unexpectedly. I know, how sad is
That's
that? I
so
just can't
sad.
imagine. It's like it's sad, but people like when you see investigators and um like ghost hunters and whatnot, they bring like toys and stuff there. A lot of the times it's for this little boy, Timmy. They'll bring toys and balls and they will see a ball moving independently. But a lot of people kind of chalk it up to the fact that there's uneven floors, the building is not level, and that it's wind. Those darn skeptics. We know what it really is. We know it's you, Timmy.
Poor little Timmy.
But it's sad but not the saddest
Mhm.
because one of the more sadder stories is the ghost of the woman with the bleeding wrist. So apparently there's a like moaning myrtle, we'll call her. She just roams the hospital and you can hear her just like moaning and just in absolute mourning, and she's just in agony and she's bleeding from her hands and feet apparently.
Mm.
um and then when anybody tries to help her or they come close to her or tried to interact with her, she runs away and she screams in horror.
But did they say, because I read about that too, but because I couldn't find it, but did they say what the cause was? Like, did anybody know how? Like,
No,
what could have caused the reason for like her wrists and
I
her.
didn't find that out, but I would be curious too. Like I was wondering like
If anyone out there knows, please let us know.
Yeah, if you have info, if you're from Louisville, Kentucky, some people who have grown up, like we have stories about Greystone. Like we've been there. We grew up around all the folklore, and so like if you're from Louisville, Kentucky and you have Waverly Hill Sanitorium stories, send them in. Go to our Instagram, the Ghoulfriend Hour pod. Is that what it's called? Oh god, I should know this.
No,
Instagram
I think it's
names
the
have just
Ghoulfriend
gotten
Hour
so
pod.
oh no, it's the underscore girl Ghoulfriend underscore hour underscore. Making an Instagram name is hard these days because there's so many. They're like, oh, that's not enough letters. Oh, you need to have this. Oh, that
You
username's
gotta
already
add
taken.
5 letters, 2 asterisks, and a partridge in a pear tree.
And the soul of your firstborn child, but we're not going to talk
Exactly.
about that.
Yeah.
But if you go to our Instagram, we also have a link tree. So you can go to the link tree and we have a YouTube, we have my personal account, everything is there. So there's a way to get in touch with us, as well as the email is on our Instagram. So anytime you want to submit anything, go to that email, submit your stories, and we will read them in our podcast. But we would love to hear some like local yokel stories, like firsthand accounts, experiences that you've had. But Waverly Hills is definitely a freaky place. Now, did you find any listener stories, like, or not listener stories, any kind of like firsthand accounts?
I mean, I saw like pictures here and there, and it's mostly like the same stuff. Like people would see the apparitions down the hallways. People would hear things, but it's mostly like what you've already mentioned about the little girl. There was another legend though, a man in a white coat who was seen walking in the kitchen. And someone
Oh.
said that you would smell the smell of cooking food that would sometimes waft through the room. I don't know if it was a particular, I guess it's the kitchen, I'm assuming. Which now that I'm reading it, it was the kitchen. Because it literally says the kitchen would always be a disaster, a ruin of broken windows, fallen plaster, broken tables and chairs, and puddles of water and debris that resulted from a leaking roof. But I don't know if that's now, like what people see now, or if that was from back then. Like now I'm curious to know, because they said that the cafeteria was also not any better. And so they said that a number of people, oh no, so this is talking about what happened now. They say a number of people reported footsteps in the room, a door swinging shut under its own power, and the smell of fresh baked. This is gonna be like buttery,
Crispy,
flaky
buttery
crust.
crust.
We're
You
getting
got
into
this.
that.
You got
We're getting
this.
into it again. The smell of fresh baked bread. It wasn't even that hard, but for some reason my brain was slowly going when I was trying to say that. People would smell fresh baked bread, buttery, flaky, crisp, in the air. So I'm done with myself today. I'm so
Can you
done.
tell the motivation is just like wavering between the two of us?
I can't.
3.5 brain cells
I think I
are
lost a half.
sponsoring.
I might have lost a half. It might be down to 3 now.
Maybe just 2, because I feel like I might have lost one in the process there.
That's
All
okay.
right, so we're down to 2 brain cells. Hi, this podcast is being sponsored by the 2 remaining brain cells of Morgan and Taylor.
I think we need to like name our brain cells. We gotta
Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of totally random, because we just named an inanimate object. I had a boy today at camp. For some reason, I've been making t-shirt bracelets with the kids. So we cut up strips of t-shirt and then we braid it like normal and make a bracelet. This kid thought it would be really cool to tie the t-shirt pieces together to make like a backpack, and then attached a rock to the shirt. So it literally looked like a backpack with a rock like tied up in it. And he goes, yeah, this is my rock backpack. It's my friend. And I go, okay, well, we got to name it. And he goes, Jimmy. And I said, perfect. I love that. So he named a rock Jimmy, and now it's his backpack, and he walks around campus.
Jimmy
And
the Rock backpack.
yeah, he was either that or it was going to be Dwayne the Rock. I was like, that's lame. I said, Jimmy's better. Jimmy Rock is like so much better.
Jimmy Rock.
Yeah.
That's a pretty like suave name.
Yeah. And the reason I was bringing that up was irrelevant, but I forgot.
Because we named our brain cells.
Yeah. Because he named it inanimate.
Don't worry, I got you. See, like this is where like two people with like ADD like come in handy, because like where you lose your train of thought, I'm focusing on where it's lost. So I'll pick it up. And then when I lose mine, you can pick mine up.
It's usually how
we'll just fill it. We'll fill the gap for one another. It's great. It's like the blind leading the blind. May not always work, but like 1% of the time it might.
We'll get there eventually.
So I found a pretty cool story. It says this is by Reddit user GXO. Goddamn Batgirl, but it's like GXDMN.
I love it already.
Yeah, I'm like, what? GXDMN Batgirl. So kudos to you, goddamn Batgirl. The title is Waverly Hills, My Experiences in a Haunted Sanatorium. It says, hello all. A fellow Redditor asked me to share a post about some of the experiences I had while investigating Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky. As I've stated in a post in the paranormal subreddit, I have been researching and investigating the paranormal since 1998. I do have my own team, and I have visited some of the most notoriously haunted locations around the US. I should also mention that I am a sensitive, and this gift does enhance my investigations. This post will be somewhat long, but hopefully it grabs your interest and you read through to the end. I visited Waverly Hills back in July of 2012, and 3 other investigators with me, Eric, Tommy, and Debbie. If you have never seen the building before, it is worth looking up. It's huge and absolutely incredible to see in person. It will be hard for me to sum up my experiences without going into great detail, because I feel that the full effect of these experiences can only be truly felt with very vivid descriptions, but I will do my best. This was the only place I've ever investigated that made me uneasy enough to want to leave. But this sensation only came over me when my team and I entered the 5th floor. Legend states that when the hospital was in operation, 1910 to 1961, a nurse had an affair with a doctor and became pregnant. Not only that, but she, and therefore her unborn baby, had contracted TB. The disease the sanatorium was determined to cure. Unable to handle the stresses of her transgression, and unable to bear the thought of her child being born with this disease, she performed her own abortion and threw her baby into the sewer system. And then she hanged herself. Okay, so we got some information that we did not have before. That's a lot darker than I was prepared for. It says in parentheses, note, this claim is not conclusively substantiated. It is just legend folklore. I am not saying that this is the particular entity I encountered here. I am just including this as background. Hospital staff as well as patients contracted TB and passed away from the disease. So the entity I interacted with here at Waverly could have been any one of those nurses. As I mentioned earlier, I am a sensitive. In a previous investigation at Prospect Place Mansion in Dresden, Ohio, I had made a connection with a female spirit there. It became so strong that at one point, while communicating with her and other entities through an SB7 spirit box, I started to feel her emotions and became so overwhelmed that I started to cry. Once the session was concluded, my own feelings came back to me, but the residue of her energy stayed with me for the duration of the night. That's the only thing I will say, just like a dramatic pause right now. Having a gift and going to places like this is like really hard, because I do feel like anytime that I, like, for instance, like when I went to Greystone and I saw people that weren't there, that like my friends didn't see, and the physical like emotions and that like energy residue that is left, I always like to like put it like metaphorically, like it reminds me of like tar, because like when you go somewhere like that, the energy just like sticks to you. And when you get home, it's like spending a day in the city. Like when you come home from the city, and you're blowing your nose and you just like, you got to take a shower because you just feel smoggy. Like you can feel the film like covering your skin.
The
best way that I can,
smell.
Yeah, pretty much. And that was my foot
smell.
on my wooden chair, by the way. I did not just rip Butte.
But it would be totally okay if you did.
Yes, farting is completely natural.
Do it all the time.
Yeah.
So
Side note. We're a mess. So yeah, so it's like tar. So like I feel like kudos to this person, because I mean it's a dark place. Like there's a lot of things that happen there. So to kind of walk away from that, like I can't imagine how they must have felt, because it probably felt super yucky, like leaving. And it was probably a pretty smoggy feeling all over. But let us continue. I almost said let is. I don't know what that meant.
Same thing. It's close enough.
Yeah. Okay. Les Mis. Anyways, at Waverly, once we reached the 5th floor, I became extremely apprehensive. Usually I will be at the front of my team, guiding them to particular locations according to the strengths of the energies in the building. Sometimes I will follow up behind in an effort to sort of protect my teammates. In this particular case, I did neither. Feeling incredibly nervous, I put my back up against the wall and would not move away from it. I tried to maintain my composure as best as I could, but I felt slightly safer and less exposed. I wanted so badly to leave, but I knew that I could not abandon an investigation or my team. I couldn't let them down. In my uncomfortable state, I pressed on, leading my team in an EVP session. We began asking basic questions to try and see if there were any intelligent entities with us. One investigator stated that we wouldn't judge her for what had happened to her, and that it was safe for her to talk to us. After a few moments of silence, I heard footsteps walking around us. Later on, when I reviewed the audio, I heard 4 very clear footsteps, which sounded like a lady's heeled shoes clicking on the linoleum. It was a fast-paced walk, as if she had somewhere important to be. Perhaps the doctor required her assistance in surgery? This would lead to other experiences throughout the night. After the 5th floor, we made our way back down to the 1st floor. I move around according to the pull of the energy in the building. This is when I went to the electroshock therapy room. Oh boy.
That's where the fun is.
Oh. It says in here we decided to separate. With each of us in a different corner of the room, and it's a big room, we decided to conduct an SB7 spirit box session, and we were not disappointed. Please note that there was virtually 0 radio interference due to the building's location and distance from any major cities or radio towers. We started with the usual introductory statements and asked the usual questions. What I look for is intelligence, so I try to elicit real-time responses from any entities which might be present. I said out loud that we had come a long way to speak with them, that we had traveled all the way from New York. I asked if they knew where New York was, and a female voice came through the box. North. Having received an intelligent response, I asked if she could tell me the name of any one person on my team. The same female voice came through again and said, Thomas. Naturally, we were impressed. We continued on. Having received 2 intelligent responses, both in the same female's voice, I said, I'm hearing a female. Do we have a lady here? What came next was disturbing. 3 different voices, dark voices, came through, joined together saying, don't speak with her. This sent absolute chills down my spine. I started asking questions like, who am I speaking with now? Why can't I speak with her? What do you want with her? I told them that they had no right to keep her and told them to let her go. If they ever did, I do not know. We did not receive another response from those dark voices, nor did we hear from the nurse, as I presume that's who we were communicating with, in this room again, and we moved on. That's heavy.
That's crazy.
Next, we went back upstairs, this time to the 4th floor's main operating room. Liking the idea of using trigger objects, Trigger objects are relative to a particular point in time of history, which might be familiar to the entities that could reside there. I brought dusk masks with us to simulate the doctor's masks. In this room, Eric took on the role as the doctor. We started another spirit box session. Tommy asked, "Do we have any nurses here who can help us?" A female voice responded, "Yes." I then asked, "Do we have a nurse here? Can you come over to the doctor and let him know that you're here and that you're ready?" Again, the female voice, "Here." I asked, "You're here?" "Nurse, how many patients do we have on the list for today?" The female voice responded, 3. My theory here is that she recognized Eric as the doctor. Perhaps she thought the other 3 of us were his patients. The conversation continued. Tommy, what's the first step? Nurse, give him first aid. We asked more questions like this, but she did not respond to them. The next question she did respond to was mine, approximately 4 minutes after her previous response. Me. Can you tell us any of our names? We are the doctor's assistants. Nurse's reply. 3. We continued trying to converse with her, but this was the last response she gave us. I felt that after a few moments of her silence, she had left the room. My final encounter with the nurse of Waverly Hills happened after our investigation had ended at 3 a.m. We had gathered up all of our gear and headed back down to the gift shop, which had been designated as headquarters for the evening. Our tour guide had stayed down there while we conducted our investigation, but when we got back down there, he had asked if any of us would be willing to go back into the building with him so that he could lock up. Of course, we all volunteered to go, and so we did. No longer feeling uneasy, I followed up at the back of the group, hoping to get a few moments away from everyone to experience the last bit of energy that Waverly was willing to share with me. As I was walking past a very large room, I'm not exactly sure which room it was, as it was still pitch black inside the building, I distinctly heard a woman speaking. It had definite female vocal tones, and she spoke a full sentence, as if having a conversation with somebody else. Unfortunately, I cannot make out what she was saying, but I know for a fact that I heard her disembodied voice with my very own ears. This was a really amazing experience for me, as I had never had such a strong connection with a spirit before. This nurse was with us from the beginning of our investigation until the very end, saving that last bit crispy buttery crust.
Rewind.
Saving that last bit of evidence just for me. She made the night truly special, one I will never forget. I can't wait to get back there and investigate it again. I wonder if she'll remember me.
That's terrifying. I don't know if I'd want a ghost to remember me.
Well, you know what's crazy was like, so after she shared this story, a lot of people, like, this thread was like long, and I was like, at first when I opened it, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can read all of this
I don't know
on
if
like
my
the
brain will pick
podcast.
this up.
Yeah, but then I saw the story was like a decent size, but it was the comments. So somebody commented, and I can't give credit to this person because they deleted their account, I think. But it says, when I was stationed back at Fort Knox, I went here with a group of friends. The fourth floor, I believe, where I believe the shadow children play. I was walking with the group and stopped to check my phone. I felt a little shove from behind, and thinking it was someone from my group, I turned around to see who it was. Well, there was no one there, and no one within 10 feet of me. Pretty cool place. That's crazy.
Ew.
And I guess he also had commented, he said the nurse that hung herself because of the doctor that left her. They said that women get physically sick walking into that bathroom. One lady in our group left the tour after she had walked in.
Oh God.
That's got to be like a really heavy, like, I just would wonder what the true story is.
Yeah. I guess now we gotta take a road trip to the sanatorium.
Yeah. But I've heard from people that, like, a couple of people that I've had on the podcast that have brought up Waverly, they were like, I wouldn't go there. Like, because it was one of those things where they're like, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
And I think my only nervous part of things would be wondering, like, if people are going there and dabbling, how much of the stuff that's there is the Waverly energy and like ghosts there. But what about that dark voice?
Yeah.
Like what's true. You know what I'm saying? So like my only fear would be like and Bishop James Long said it best. He said, if you go looking for the D word, don't be surprised if you find them. Ooh. And I was like, okay, all right, yep, point taken. Like, that's a good point, because I'm very conscientious about that aspect of things. And it's not all not all necessarily the D word, but I do feel like when you have a lighter energy or you're sensitive, you're kind of like a beacon in the dark. And darker spirits or darker energies that are not necessarily the D word, but they're also not good for you, have a habit of being like magnetized to you. Like, so, yeah, there was a lot of people kind of contributing to the thread, and some of them had some like really, really good stories. This one person said went to a tour in 2011. Two things, one mild and one more intense. The mild one was that all the pics I took in the death tunnel disappeared. This was digital camera days. I did have an early iPhone, but took pics with the camera for some reason, and only those pics were gone. The other was we were in the room where some of the surgeries were done, and the tour guide said the doctor's ghost did not like him. A door slammed while he was talking to him, and to this day, my husband swears it was rigged. Well, okay. The death chute. This is where somebody said, I had expected this part of Waverly to be the creepiest part. However, it wasn't. It was weird walking through it, don't get me wrong. But when you're actually standing in the rooms where people had suffered and you see the rooms where certain medical procedures were conducted, it's far, far creepier. And somebody just kind of said, yeah, those were definitely like the heaviest. Somebody wrote, Comac resident here. I live 5 minutes from this place. We used to break in there and walk around with baseball bats just in case.
What would that do?
Not for ghosts, but I guess if there's like...
Well, I did read that when 2001 came around, and I think that's when they started, like, when it was officially abandoned and like people were starting to explore it, a lot of homeless people were taking...
That's common. Greystone had a lot of homeless people. That's why it was so heavily like policed. And then there was a couple other abandoned. There was an abandoned nursing home that I went to once in New Jersey, and I wish I could think of. It's right on 46. It's like off of 46, but it's like on top of a hill, and you have to like hike to get there. And I have pictures, which I actually want to like dig into my hard drive to find them for an episode, because it was wild. Like we were in there like swimwear. I mean, we were deep. It was spooky because we went to the pool room and I could feel something there with us. And I saw a figure of a person. It was definitely a spirit. And they were just kind of hanging out in the corner of the old pool room, and the pool was completely empty. But there was like chairs thrown in there, just like miscellaneous stuff, some leaves, and but it was eerie because it was such a large room and everything like echoed. And it was me and three of my other friends. I mean, we're standing there and we're just kind of like marveling at everything, and it was like dusk, so it was getting dark. And we heard like, it sounded like footsteps on like glass, like that crackling, like, and it sounded like boots on glass. And I was like, I mean, obviously, like, could it have been a homeless person? It could have, because there was a lot of
really cool boots.
Or it could have been a ghost with some really sick Doc Marts.
Yeah, right. No shame.
But yeah, so there's a lot of stuff. But this person said that we used to break in there with baseball bats just in case, go through the sewers, and hoist ourselves up between the metal bars that they have on the elevated walkways. It's private property, and if you get caught, you will go to jail. We found this one place with blood on the walls, and literal shit in the corner of the room with the word shroom room spray painted in huge red writing on the wall. Lots of newspaper looking beds too, really sketchy. The downstairs was the worst though. The top 2 floors looked like the usual homeless hangouts, but downstairs is straight up horrifying. There's bats flying through the air too, so you feel something brush by you and hiss. I'm a self-admitted bitch, so I got real freaked out. Lots of weird sounds, like you said, although I did see a dog. A homeless guy was playing frisbee outside with him, and he was named Hero. Good fella. The crematorium, though, fuck that. Okay, simply put. So that was high school. Yeah, pretty much. I was like, that was high school, though, like 8 years ago. No way I'd go in now. It was super sketchy in every way possible. There's just like a lot of people that kind of did like the same thing. And this person says the worst part is the access tunnels we used to take in, filled with all manner of creepy crawlies. I don't know what this means. Chiefest and greatest calamity in my book was those freaking cave crickets, or whatever the hell those winged spawns of Satan are called. I remember the first time thinking that no part of that closed mental institution can be nearly as creepy as those tunnels. And boy, was I right. I'm sure it didn't help that we investigated the mushrooms before we went into the tunnels. But hey, hindsight, I think the funniest part was everyone's choice in weapon. From baseball bats to that old vehicular anti-theft device, the club. No one dared enter unarmed.
Oh.
The club.
The club.
It's just like, it's literally just a piece of wood.
Yeah.
Matt literally had one of those like in his truck.
Just to have.
And I was like, I got in his truck one time. We were like dating, and I'm like, did something break? Like, I was like, what is this? And he's like, oh, that's just in case, just in case I ever need it. It's like in case somebody like tries to hijack me or like, and I'm like, okay, well,
that's the yee way.
I'm like, that's what pepper spray is for, or like a good old just
a baseball bat would have worked. Yeah. And I know he had a baseball bat because the 3 of them were like the biggest baseball fans, and they always did baseball growing up. So I know
all sorts of stuff. They had hockey sticks. They had there's so many different choices of weapons. Said he chose like a half-ass splintered piece of wood, and I'm like, what did you were you just driving by somebody's fence and you just pop this off and we're like, oh, this would make a great weapon in case somebody tries to carjack me.
Yeah, good job,
coming from the man who has anti-theft system on his car. I'm like, when you put that shit in park, everything locks. When you're at a red light, so nobody can. That's the whole point of it. We've grown since the 80s.
We really
have. You could just Grand Theft Auto somebody's car. You just walk up, rip them out, and just steal the car.
You're right.
I've never done that though. I'm not speaking from experience, and I know that sounds super suspect, but I promise I've never carjacked anybody Grand Theft Auto style.
Morgan's being sussy now. As the kids say it in school, super sussy.
Sussy. No cap. That's what my godson says. He's like, Momo, stop, stop. He's like, no cap. And I'm like, what what's that mean?
They try to speak to me in their language, and I'm just like, what are you saying? I don't understand.
The only thing that I can understand is period. But that's because I feel like I was saying that before it was a thing, because I would be like, I'm not talking to you, period. Done, conversation over. So that makes sense to me. I'm like, okay, we can bring that back. But when you're saying no cap, what? Excuse me? No cap, bro?
What is the cap? Well, no cap. No,
if there's no cap, there's
no cap, I'm being real. Maybe it's a cap on a soda can or something.
Oh my god, sounds means that I forget if it's no. Yeah, I don't know if it's cap means don't lie, or no cap is you're BSing. I see. I don't understand it. I still don't understand it. He says it to me all the time, and I'm like, okay. I'm like,
I thought no cap was you're not lying, you're being truthful.
You know that TikTok that's skipper dapper dack or whatever, and it's what?
Yabber scabber.
Yeah. Huh? I don't know. I don't understand. That's Patrick
me. And I always reference that TikTok. all the
Because
time.
it's so true. I'm like, every video that I've seen with that sound, I'm like, okay, my favorite being the grocery store one, where it's like that when the cashier like hands you your change and your receipt and you're trying to like not be in everybody's way, but you're trying to get it back in your wallet, and it's like rabbit it's scabbard. He's like, I don't sorry, what?
Kashmirga.
I'm like, you're gonna give me a panic attack trying to buy some oranges. Like, can we not do this today? I'm trying to find, there was another one. The one I really want to dig into at some point is Letchworth Village in New York.
I need to take you.
That's scary.
I need to take you. I haven't done a whole lot of experience or research, but I experienced going there multiple times. And the scariest out of the entire village, because there's certain places in the village that aren't open to the public, which some of them aren't really that great anyways.
Letchworth?
Letchworth, yeah. I've been there.
Oh, so you've been there?
Yeah, that's one of the places I've been. I went with my friends back mostly early on college, but
back in the long times ago the days.
Yeah. The last time I went there was I think a year or two ago. I went with my friend Anna. She's my spooky biffle. We always bonded over urban exploration and stuff, and she is a really great person to urban explore with, because she, out of all the friends I ever urban explored with, she was always super respectful. When I go to these abandoned places, the one thing I always made sure was to be respectful, because obviously it's spooky, it's fun, it's scary, but I never wanted to be disrespectful, especially to whatever was lurking and living there. And she was always really great. But in that village there's a few places, but there's one particular, it's I think it's the main hospital building, because it's the biggest building on the whole site. It looks like an L shape, so there's two entrances. They're really long hallways from the entrance to the main entrance or whatever. It's very hard to get into sometimes. The first time we went, we had to go through the side window, which of course, what did it lead us into? A room that looked like a tiny room that looked like it looked like a tiny dentist office, but now that I'm thinking about it, I wonder if it was
that's creepy,
a lobotomy room, because it had that chair and then it had cabinets and stuff, and of course we got in and we walked down the hallway, and my friend immediately was screamed and was I swear to God, I just saw something. And sometimes I couldn't tell if she was being funny or serious, but it scared the shit out of me. We immediately climbed right back out that window, and I was like, okay, we need to go back in and try it again.
I'm trying to find so Sean Austin, who I had on the podcast, he has a bunch of they're on Scare Network TV. He's made a lot of little horror documentaries about true cases. So on Scare Network TV, you can look it up. It's called Letchworth. And for listeners, Sean Austin, demonologist, he's on Netflix, 28 Days Haunted, I think is what it's called. He does a lot. I could go on and on. He's a man of many hats. Scare Network TV, if you want, you can go on there. You can watch Letchworth. You can watch Amityville, The Resurgence. That one he did with Ralph Sarchie. There's a lot of good ones, but Letchworth is on there, and it's pretty decent, I gotta say.
It's really spooky there. I'll have to send you and if there's any way maybe we could show the pictures on here one day. I have some really creepy photos that I had taken, especially there's one building there. It was an old gymnasium and the roof is caved in. So when you're on the one side, there's two stages. It's a stage, the gym, and then a stage. So from the one side you can literally see the outside coming in.
Yeah.
And you can't really go, I don't think you can go into the gym part because it's covered in debris from the roof caving in. It's really cool though. And that's the place that
So it's like pretty decrepit though.
Yeah, but what's amazing and crazy at the same time is that it is shut down. You are not supposed to trespass, but it's so large and the paths are so long and like big. Like people are there all the time. It's not busy, but people are there walking their dogs, taking strolls. Like it's basically like a public park, but the buildings themselves you are not supposed to go in. So they're really like trusting the public not to go in, which they're
So
not
it's
very
kind of
good
like
at.
Waterloo Village.
Yeah. But
Okay.
Waterloo Village is you're able to go in it again now.
Those
They like
houses?
reopened it. Oh, I don't know. Do they? I just know you can go to the Waterloo Village again. Like I know
Yeah.
it's shut down, which
But
was
I more so meant
terrible.
like, you know how they have all those houses there
Yeah. Well,
that
I
are like
never.
historic? You're not supposed to go in those,
Oh, well,
but
people
like you
probably
can
still
walk
do it.
like the village grounds.
Yeah, I'm a little salty because I never got to go there. Uh, in fourth or fifth grade, we were supposed to have a field trip there, and we had this National Honor Society that our history teacher was in charge of. She was like the best. She always took us to like the cool places like Ford Phage House, Jockey Hollow. Um, oh God, there was like so many cool like old abandoned places she took us. There was like this church she took us to. Um, she was supposed to take us to Waterloo, but they had closed it down like a year or two before. And then of course a couple years later they reopened it. And I was like salty. And then what's crazy too is that the camp that I work at is down the street from Waterloo. So every time I get on the road, there's a sign that literally says the way that I need to go is the opposite way that Waterloo Village is. And I get
You
so
should just go
salty.
one day.
I was thinking about it, but the problem is that I don't get out of work till like 4:20, 4 o'clock. So they're probably closed by the time I get out, unless I get a day where I get to leave early. I really want to go though.
I love Waterloo. I've done a lot just as a photographer. I've done a lot of engagement photos and stuff there. I've been there like what, let's see, 5 to 8 times.
Damn, I haven't been
Yeah.
there once.
A lot of people like it. I mean, it's a nice little place to get your pictures done, especially in the fall. I've done fall. I went there in a blizzard and did
Oh,
snow pictures to test out my new camera. And then my friend Robert wanted to test his new video camera because he was in film school. And then I did another 2 engagement photos. I did a maternity shoot, portraits. Yeah, I've been there a lot,
that's crazy.
but it's just like a nice, serene place.
Yeah,
Definitely has some spooky vibes though.
I can
Um,
imagine.
but yeah, so that's pretty much it for Waverly Hills Sanatorium. There is there's a lot of really good information like on Reddit, some things that um we didn't maybe cover. So you guys can always go on there and kind of check some of that out. One thing I did want to add, though, that I thought was pretty cool is I did find this. So it said many doctors, nurses, and other staff were often quarantined themselves and unable to leave, which we already talked about. It said it was a high risk job, but it paid very well, which is why it attracted a lot of people. It said the pay records from the 20s found that nurses were paid $45 a week, which is about $600 today, plus had room and board. Doctors were paid more and were provided with houses, many of which still stand in our private residences today. Lots of people were happy to take the risk due to the salaries. Now, it said as the TB epidemic struck more and more people, Waverly was a forerunner in experimental surgeries and medications. X-rays were greatly advanced during this time. Common treatments included lobectomy and pneumoectomy, the surgical removal of sections of the lung or even a whole lung, the thoracoplasty, the surgical removal of several rib bones from the chest wall in order to collapse a lung. In the time that the surgery was commonplace, the average patient required the removal of 7 to 8 ribs. Most surgeons preferred to remove only 2 to 3 ribs at a time, and thus patients had to endure several procedures before the entire thoroplasty was finished. That's a lot, several procedures in order to remove
Crazy.
7 to 8 ribs.
So they had to do it in increments then?
2 to 3 ribs at a time.
That's crazy.
artificial pneumothorax, which consists of introduction of air into the pleural cavity or between the coverings of the lung, which collapses the diseased area, finally leading to complete recovery. We think that it's pretty barbaric today, but it's literally all they could do until 1944 when an antibiotic that successfully treated and cured TB was discovered. Patient numbers thinned after that, and Waverly Hills remained a functioning TB hospital until 1961 when it closed its door. TB was no longer a threat and could be taken care of in normal hospitals or even at home. To dispel popular legend at the height of the TB epidemic, there was on average of around 1 to 2 deaths a day at Waverly Hills. There wasn't a death an hour. There is no documentation supporting that was ever a reality. There is also no documentations that support the legend of room 502, which we're not going to feed into that negativity because we like the spooky side of things. So I'm not even reading that. If you're a skeptic, you're probably on the wrong podcast because we are believers.
Yeah.
But in 1962, the hospital opened its doors once more, but it was now Woodhaven Geriatric Center. Once again, not a mental health facility, just a nursing home. There are a lot of documented stories of patient abuse and neglect during this time, especially toward the end. Woodhaven was closed in 1981. The building sat empty and neglected until the current owners bought it. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So like, I mean, I thought that was a pretty good, little tidbit of history, some things that we didn't cover. But yeah, I mean, I think Waverly Hills is one of those places that you can read all the stories that you want and, you can listen to the fun folklore, but I don't think anybody will truly believe. It's good to get spooked, but until I think you physically go there and experience it for yourself, that you're going to have a lot of skeptics and a lot of he said, she said. So I would love to go to Waverly Hills, but at the same time, it's not that I'm skeptic. I'm nervous. I'm a nervous Nelly.
Yeah. No, I don't blame you. I'd probably be the same way, especially when you're clairvoyant or sensitive. It's one thing to read about things, but when you're actually there experiencing it, it's so different. I know that, I never figured out, and I'm probably not as clairvoyant, but I do feel like I'm very empathic, so I do feel a lot of things. And when we went to Gettysburg and whenever I'd go to those abandoned places, you read about them and it's that's one thing, but then when you're actually there and you feel the heaviness, even the other day I took a drive with Patrick and I was I want to go to Greystone. I know that it's not there anymore and it's just a field now, but I always like to go back to see it even if it's not there anymore. And the one thing I've never done, I've seen it completely just the field, but I never stepped foot on it. And so it was the first time I put both feet on that ground and it just felt so heavy. And it's crazy too, especially where these places are, because you look around and you see that there's normal life going on. If you've seen Greystone lately, if not, I have to show you next time you come up. They now have all of the side fields on the road. It's all soccer games, baseball games, these crazy hockey games that they have, playgrounds and stuff. When I used to go with my family on visits to go see Greystone when it was completely shut down and we would just go take drives there, it was dead. You'd see maybe a car or two pass by. There was never really anyone around. But now you go and there's cars lined up on the streets, cars packed in the parking lots and stuff. There's games going on every single night. It's what's crazy is that you look at the field that once used to be Greystone and it never gets used. It's just empty. Yeah. You'll see maybe one or two people, but it's just it's so still and quiet. And I stepped on there and I'm oh my God, it's so heavy feeling. It just feels you've read things and what had happened in that space that you're standing in. But then you like walk back to your car, you walk down the street, and it's like you hear all these people chatting, like going about their lives, and it's just as crazy.
I think it adds to like the creep factor of it, like the eeriness. I shouldn't even say creep, it's like eerie, because like that's how I feel about Gettysburg. Like whenever we go to Gettysburg, it's weird to me because it's like you see people walking their dogs or kids running across the fields or people taking pictures of the monuments, and then like where my head goes is I'm like, my feet are walking across grass,
Yeah,
where there are body parts and blood and like sordid violent history all over the grounds that I'm walking on, and that people's dead bodies were literally strewn across these fields in like massive numbers. And like that's where my head goes. Like I'm like, it's just weird to see these places like just so normal now and just as is, like, but to see them like in their prime, well, I shouldn't say they're not like their prime, but to see them in their most highest functioning state of like that time period would probably terrify like modern day people.
mm-hmm.
Because what's normal for them is like really disturbing for us, because what we know now is that the things that they were doing was like just inhumane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that like we're actually finishing on time for once. It is like
I know, right?
8:30 on the dot. So do you want to close this out, Taylor?
I don't know, because I feel like we're gonna have to practice again.
Here come the bloopers.
I honestly am so tired that I forgot how we close it out.
Until next time.
Are we getting weird?
Oh, that's right. We said let's get weird at the beginning.
That's true. We said the whole reason we were gonna say at the beginning, so we wouldn't have to say it at the end.
All right, we're gonna say like until next time. Keep it spooky.
Can't we? I like the
You have to like
pizzazz,
get close
though.
to your mic though and be like,
I don't know if it's gonna fuck it up though.
Keep it
Okay, wait. I feel like it should be ASMR. Until next time, let's keep it spooky. I feel like you added pizzazz, and I felt like it needed to be pizzazzy. Get spooky.
You get a little pizzazzy. I can't. I feel like I sound like Herbert the pervert. Let's
get some spooky in here.
I can't. All right, so I'm gonna. Okay, so you say until next time. Keep it spooky, or keep whatever you want to say. You honestly just make your own thing up and say it with your own pizzazz, and then I'll say mine with my own pizzazz. Yeah, and whoever gets the pizzazziest gets to say the introduction next time. I'm
already claiming the spookiness. Okay. So, until next time, stay spooky. Until next time, stay spooky. Oh shit, that was kind of goosebumpy. Oh my god. I'm not gonna lie, I've had to pee this whole time, and honestly that almost made me pee my pants, you know.
Okay, don't pay a pants. We're gonna close this out. So thanks for listening. Until next time, keep it spooky. And we'll keep it extra weird for the next episode, because that's just who 100%. We are as people. I have a really good story next time to share with everyone. Oh, it's gonna get, when we say let's get weird, the reason we say that is because like it's a challenge. It's not just a saying, it's a challenge. Like we want to get weirder every day. All right, Taylor, go pee before you pee your pants. And we're gonna hang up now. Okay, bye everybody. Thanks for listening.